We continue in our first reading through the book of Kings, through the stories of the prophet Elijah. And boy, it'd make a good movie, huh? You know, this is his famous battle today against the 450 prophets of Baal up on top of Mount Carmel. And just kind of backing up and keeping it all in context, remember, all this is still happening during this long drought that is taking place in Elijah's time. So remember, it's been a couple years. We were skipping around in some of the passages, but it's not until tomorrow that he's actually going to begin to pray for rain to come back. And so here he has been, basically a little food, a little water. He's been living with a widow and her son, getting a little bread, little water every day. And now God tells him to go meet with King Ahab, assemble everyone together on top of Mount Carmel. And so in the middle of a drought, maybe in the middle of a food shortage, he's got to now walk and go climb a mountain and then engage in this battle. Again, just keeping it in context, because to remind ourselves, it's not easy to be a prophet of God. There's nothing really glorious on this earth about being a prophet of God. Think about how difficult this was. Maybe he was probably thinking, gosh, Lord, I was just starting to get comfortable hanging out with this widow and her son, eating my daily bread. Now I've got to go take this long journey to the top of Mount Carmel and confront the king and confront the Israelites and confront these false prophets. I'm tired. I don't have the energy to do that. I'm hungry. All these things that we might be thinking too. But he goes. He continues to go and see how God is going to work and to act in his life. And he does this challenge with these prophets of Baal and does a lot of trash talking, huh? The prophets talk a lot of trash on behalf of God. And he challenges them. And he gets this idea to set up these two offerings, and he says, the God who answers by fire, who starts the fire himself, is the true living God. And they all agree. The God who answers by fire is God. Where do you think he got that idea from? Can you think back in the past, in the history of Israel, up to Elijah's day here? Has there been any other times where God has answered by fire? Or come down through fire, How about the burning bush? Moses, yeah? There he is, fire. How about when Moses he's going to establish a covenant relationship with the people, and he goes up the mountain to get the 10 Commandments for the first time, but before he goes up the mountain, God had come down upon the mountain in fire, and then the whole mountain was surrounded by smoke. So that's why the Israelites were afraid to go up there. They said, yeah, you go up there, Moses. In the book of Judges, after they get into the promised land and get settled, and they go astray a little bit, in the book of Judges, you've got Gideon, and the angel of the Lord comes to Gideon, and basically calls him to go out and lead the armies to destroy the Philistines and the enemy. And one of what Gideon does first, one of the things he does first, is that he says, well, hold on, let me bring you an offering. And he prepares a stew for him. The angel says, put it on this rock. Dump out all the broth around it so it's nice and wet, and then the angel Lord touches it and it consumes in fire, goes up to heaven, then the angel goes up to fire in heaven in the fire. So fire's all over the place. After this, we don't read it during Mass. Maybe it's too graphic, I don't know, but you can read it on your own in Kings, And after this, the king will come looking for Elijah with some of his army, and so the army lieutenants have to find him and say, get down from the mountain, the king wants to see you. And they call him man of God. Oh, man of God, come down the mountain, the king wants to see you, he demands to see you right now. And Elijah will say, well, if I am a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume you. And it does. So fire is all over the place. And so Elijah calls this down. If the God who answers by fire will be the one true God. And we see Elijah, of course, the false prophets, nothing happens. He says nothing happened because nobody was there, because nobody was listening, because nobody was there. There is no other God. And so then Elijah makes his and sets it up. And notice, he sets it up just like Moses had instructed the Israelites when they were to build altars. You get 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel and stack them all up, and that becomes the altar that you lay the Holocaust offering on. And these sacrifices and offerings were always there to either establish or renew a covenant commitment between God and the people. Basically, to renew their wedding vows together. There always is a sacrifice required. You can't really renew your wedding vows with your husband or wife unless you're going to make some kind of a sacrifice. Maybe the husband got to make a new ring. Maybe they just got to go out to a nice dinner, a nice night out. So you're paying the price, the cost of that. So there's some sacrifice. You can't just say, "Oh, I love you," but not show it, right? There's a little sacrifice that comes. No pressure, you guys. Sorry, man. Maybe I'm getting people in trouble now. So God requires a sacrifice of his people. So this is what Elijah is doing, is he's really trying to renew this covenant, commitment, and relationship and bond between the people and God. And so he has this Holocaust offering. And of course, God comes down in fire, consumes, and accepts the offering, so the relationship is established, and the people get fired up, And that's the whole point of these offerings, was not just that we would learn to sacrifice something outside of ourselves, but that we would learn to sacrifice ourselves in love for God. And so we see with Gideon, after he makes the sacrifice and the angel receives it with fire, then Gideon is fired up now. And so are his tribe and then his people, and he goes and leads the army to conquer the enemies. And here, Elijah makes this Holocaust whole burnt offering sacrifice. God receives it in fire, and he's fired up. And then the people get fired up, we heard, right? They say, "The Lord is God, the Lord is God." And of course, then we missed the best, for me, the best part. They skipped the best part. Maybe it's too graphic for Mass, But you go read it in Kings chapter 18, okay? The very next part, then Elijah says, right after the people say, "The Lord is God," Elijah says, "Now you grab all those false prophets, and we're going to kill every one of them for leading you astray." The people, so after the whole burnt offering, the people get fired up to give their whole lives and live their whole lives for God, and they go out and conquer the enemy. And that's the point here for us, at this holy sacrifice of the Mass that we celebrate. So that we offer not just Jesus, but ourselves, our own lives with Jesus, as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, saying, "I will live my life for you. I'm fired up now. I come to Mass, I get a good word in the homily, I get the Eucharist, and now I'm filled up, I'm fired up to go out there in the world and live my life for you, God, to conquer the enemy of sin and death," right? That's the enemy that Jesus conquered. Maybe you like to go punch somebody else in the face. No, but you got to punch sin and death, fear of death in the face, That's what we're always tempted in the world. We're always tempted either to sin and turn away from God, or we're tempted to give in to fear and despair of death. But Jesus came so we'd be fearless in the face of death, right? And to prove it, he rose from the dead. And he said, "Now you come and watch me." No, he didn't say, "Come and watch me." He said, "Come and follow me," right? Did he give all of us a bag of popcorn and say, "Watch the movie? Watch me while I work"? He said, "Come and follow me." Living your life for God, conquering sin in your life, and conquering that fear of death, because even when you die, however you die, my Holy Spirit within you will raise you from the dead. That's why the apostles were so fired up after Pentecost. So that's the challenge for us today, still today, as we gather for this holy sacrifice of the Mass, to ask ourselves, is there any way we are like the Israelite people in the passage today, where we might be on the fence a little bit, or wavering a little bit, or not living our life for God with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength? Is there any way in our life we're holding back our love from God? And then we offer this sacrifice of the Mass so we can leave here filled with the life of Christ and fired up to go continue conquering that enemy in our life and in the world, sin and fear of death.